He thought he was just researching a role. But when the cameras rolled and she looked into his eyes, he realized he'd been living her nightmare his entire life. Marcus Rivera was Hollywood's golden boy. 6 feet tall with perfectly styled dark hair, a $1 million smile, and a kind of effortless charm that made directors fight over him. At 28, he'd already starred in 3 blockbuster action films and had his pick of any role in town. He was used to being the hero, the heartthrob, the guy who always got the girl and saved the day. Acting came naturally to him because, frankly, his real life wasn't much different from the characters he played, privileged, confident, and seemingly invincible. But his upcoming role was different. Shattered Glass was an intense psychological drama about domestic abuse, and Marcus was cast as David, an abusive husband whose wife finally finds the courage to leave him. It was the kind of role that could earn him an Oscar, but it was also the darkest character he'd ever been asked to portray. The script was raw, unflinching, and required him to dive into the psyche of a man who used fear and violence to control the woman he claimed to love. Enter Sarah Chun, 34 years old, slight in build with gentle brown eyes that seemed to hold depths of pain and wisdom. Her voice was soft but steady, and there was something about the way she carried herself that suggested she'd learned to make herself small to survive. Sarah wasn't an actress or a coach in the traditional sense. She was a survivor of domestic abuse who now worked as an advocate and consultant for films and TV shows that dealt with the subject. The studio had hired her to help Marcus understand the reality of what his character put his victims through. Their first meeting was scheduled for a quiet coffee shop in Venice Beach. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late, sunglasses on, fresh from a workout with his personal trainer. He spotted Sarah immediately. She was the only person in the cafe who looked nervous, checking her phone and glancing toward the door every few seconds. "Sarah, I'm Marcus," he said, sliding into the seat across from her with his trademark confident grin. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane." Sarah looked up and offered a small smile. "It's okay. Thank you for agreeing to this. I know it's unusual." Marcus had initially resisted the idea. He was a method actor, sure, but he'd never needed a consultant before. He could read the script, watch some movies, do his research online. But his agent had insisted it would be good publicity, showing his commitment to authenticity and social responsibility. "So, how does this work exactly?" Marcus asked, already checking his phone for messages. "Do you just tell me what it's like, or?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "Marcus, can I ask you something first? Have you ever felt truly powerless? Like someone else controlled every aspect of your life?" Marcus laughed, but it came out more dismissive than he intended. "I mean, we all have bosses, right? Directors, producers, agents telling us what to do." "That's not what I mean," Sarah said quietly. "I'm talking about being afraid to speak too loudly because it might set someone off, about having to ask permission to see your own friends, about walking on eggshells every single day, never knowing which version of someone you're going to get when they walk through the door." Something in her tone made Marcus put his phone down. For the first time, he really looked at Sarah, not as a consultant or a source of information, but as a person. And in that moment, he saw something in her eyes that made his stomach twist with recognition, though he couldn't quite place why. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah guided Marcus through the psychology of abuse with a patience and thoroughness that both impressed and disturbed him. She didn't just explain the tactics abusers used: isolation, gaslighting, financial control, escalating threats. She helped him understand the mindset behind them. "Abusers aren't monsters," she explained during one of their sessions in her small, impeccably organized apartment. "That's what makes them so dangerous. They're often charming, successful, likable to everyone else. The abuse isn't about anger. It's about power and control. Your character David doesn't hit his wife because he's mad. He does it because it works, because it keeps her afraid and compliant." Marcus found himself hanging on every word. Sarah had a way of explaining complex psychological dynamics that made everything click. But more than that, he found himself genuinely caring about her story, about the 4 years she spent trapped in a marriage that nearly destroyed her. "How did you finally leave?" he asked one afternoon as they sat in her living room, going through the script scene by scene. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "One day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore. I realized I'd been holding my breath for so long that I'd forgotten how to breathe. So I took one deep breath, packed a bag while he was at work, and walked out the door. Just like that. Just like that. Though just like that was preceded by years of planning, saving money in secret, and building up enough courage to believe I deserved better. Marcus felt something shift inside him during those 3 weeks. Sarah's insights were transforming not just his understanding of the role, but his understanding of himself. He began noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. The way some men talked to their girlfriends in restaurants, the subtle power dynamics in his own relationships, the casual entitlement he'd always taken for granted. But it wasn't until the day before filming began that the real revelation hit him. They were running through David's most intense scene, the one where he corners his wife in their bedroom, blocking her exit while he screams accusations at her. Sarah was reading the wife's lines, and as Marcus delivered David's dialogue, he noticed Sarah's breathing change. Her voice became smaller, her posture more defensive. "I never cheated on you, David, please." "Don't lie to me," Marcus roared, stepping closer just as the script indicated. "I saw the way you looked at him." Sarah flinched, a real, involuntary flinch that had nothing to do with acting. And in that moment, Marcus saw his own father standing in their childhood kitchen, towering over his mother, while 8-year-old Marcus hid behind the doorway. The memory hit him like a physical blow. His father's voice, thick with alcohol and rage. His mother's terrified whispers. The sound of something breaking. A plate, a picture frame, sometimes his mother's spirit. The way Marcus learned to become invisible when his father was in one of his moods. The way he learned to be perfect to avoid setting him off. Marcus stumbled backward, the script falling from his hands. I'm sorry, I can't." "Marcus." Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay?" But Marcus wasn't okay. For the first time in 20 years, he was remembering what he'd spent his entire adult life trying to forget. The fear, the helplessness, the terrible understanding that the person who was supposed to protect you was the person you most needed protection from. The first day of filming arrived, and Marcus was a mess. He'd barely slept, had turned down his usual pre-filming dinner with the cast, and had spent the night staring at the ceiling of his trailer, wrestling with memories he'd buried so deep he'd convinced himself they belonged to someone else. The scene they were shooting was relatively simple. David coming home from work to find dinner slightly overcooked. It was meant to show the audience how quickly David could escalate from normal to terrifying over something completely trivial. Marcus took his position, waiting for the director's call. His co-star Emma, who played his wife, stood at the kitchen counter looking nervous. The set was dressed to look like a middle-class home, warm, inviting, normal, exactly like the house Marcus had grown up in. Action! Marcus opened the front door and stepped into the kitchen. Emma turned with a bright, slightly anxious smile. "Hi, honey. How was work?" "Dinner's almost ready. Marcus was supposed to interrupt her, to immediately start finding fault. But instead, he froze. Because standing in that kitchen, looking at Emma's expectant, slightly fearful expression, he wasn't seeing his co-star anymore. He was seeing his mother, and he wasn't Marcus Rivera, Hollywood star. He was 8 years old, watching his father come home, never knowing whether tonight would be a good night or a bad night. "Cut," the director called. "Marcus, you missed your line." Marcus shook his head, trying to focus. "Sorry, let me try again." They reset, and the director called action once more. But again, Marcus found himself paralyzed. The words were right there in his script, but he couldn't make himself say them, because saying them would mean becoming his father, and that was the one role he'd sworn he'd never play. After the third take, the director called for a break. Marcus walked off set without a word, Sarah following close behind. "Marcus, what's happening?" she asked gently. He turned to face her, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes that he was fighting hard to hold back. "I can't do it," he whispered. "I thought I could, but I can't become him. I won't become him." "Your father?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus's composure finally cracked. "How did you know?" "Because I've seen that look before. The recognition. The terror of seeing yourself in someone else's darkness." They stood in silence for a moment before Sarah spoke again. Marcus, you're not your father. Playing this role doesn't make you him, but understanding him, understanding how abuse happens, how it perpetuates itself, that might be the most important thing you ever do. What if I can't separate myself from a character? What if doing this changes me? Sarah smiled sadly. You're not giving yourself enough credit. Your father probably never questioned whether he was doing the right thing. The fact that you're terrified of becoming him means you already haven't. When filming resumed the next day, Marcus was different. He was still David, still delivered the lines with chilling authenticity. But there was something else there too, a deep understanding of the cycle of abuse, of how victims and perpetrators are often created by the same system of violence and control. His performance in Shattered Glass would go on to earn him an Oscar, but more importantly, it launched his advocacy work with domestic violence organizations. He and Sarah remained close friends, and he credited her with not just teaching him how to play a role, but would help him understand the difference between portraying darkness and becoming it. Years later, at the film's premiere, Marcus would dedicate his award to all the children who grew up afraid in their own homes, and to the brave survivors who helped the rest of us understand that breaking the cycle is possible. The real victory wasn't the award or the critical acclaim. It was the moment Marcus realized that his greatest strength as an actor and as a man came not from pretending to be invincible, but from having the courage to acknowledge his own wounds and use them to heal others. Sometimes the roles that terrify us most are the ones we most need to play. Not because they show us who we are, but because they show us who we refuse to become. Family, and until next time, if you want more stories like that, do not forget to subscribe.